About 5 years ago, the Phanteks Eclipse P400A was one of the most popular cases on the market. Phanteks is following that trend with a new version called the G400A. It borrows a lot of ideas that they created with the original P400A, expanded on them, and made this one of the best $99 cases on the market. Let's do our usual thing. Let's take a bit of a closer look and see what makes this new case from Phanteks tick. Spoiler alert, this case is pretty freaking excellent. Let's take a closer look.
This video is brought to you by Gigabyte and Aorus and their new lineup of X870 and Z890 motherboards that support both the Intel Core 2 Ultra series processors and the new AMD Ryzen 9000 series processors. Both chipsets offer robust and efficient power delivery and cooling across the various models, especially with the new King, the AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D. All boards across the range feature auto overclocking with AI-powered software for ease of use to help you squeeze every last megahertz of performance from your unlocked CPU. Speaking of AI, Gigabyte also has a new range of X870 and Z890 AI Top series boards that allow you to train your own AI models via their new AI Top utility. All of these X870 and Z890 boards feature options like Wi-Fi 7, 10 gigabit Ethernet, Thunderbolt 4, and plenty of USB ports with toolless M.2 slots. The whole range of new Gigabyte and Aorus X870 and Z890 motherboards are available from your favourite online retailers right now. And if you're in Australia or New Zealand, Aorus will throw in a 1TB Gen 4 SSD with eligible motherboard models. For more info, check out the links in the video description.
Let's start off with panel removal. To remove the TG side panel, there's two captive thumb screws. You want to loosen up those thumb screws and then you slide the panel back and then away from the case. To remove the rear panel, it's exactly the same deal. There's two captive thumb screws. You want to loosen those and then slide the panel back and then away from the case. To remove the top panel, there's a little notch on the top panel. It's magnetic. You can just pop that up, lift that, and pull that away. To remove the front panel, there's a little notch on the top edge, and then you put your finger in there and you can pull that down and then away from the case. And finally, there is a side panel on the PSU shroud with a single screw. If you loosen that screw up, you can slide that back and then you can pull that away from the case. You know the joke, guys. There's two dust filters. There's a magnetic dust filter on the front, which can be pulled with a little tab on the front of the case. And that will help with all of the intake from the front of the case. There's also a fan filter on the bottom for the PSU underneath the bottom of the case, and that can be slid out from the back quite easily. As for storage in the G400A, you can have 2 drives in total on this removable hard drive sled. You can do two 2.5-inch SSDs or two 3.5-inch drives on the bottom here. For maximum power supply support, you can install power supplies up to 270 millimeters in total length. And you can also have one, I guess, even longer if you remove those hard disks at the front. As for pre-installed fans, there's 4 M25-140 DRGB fans from Phanteks in the case. There's 3 up the front and then there's 1 at the back. As mentioned, all 140 millimeter fans. As for RGB in the case though, there is this RGB strip on the bottom of the PSU shroud, and it gives it some nice edge lighting. The way this works is you have 2 types of RGB connectors. You have 2 3-pin 5V addressable RGB connectors, and to power the fans, it is 4-pin PWM power. For cable management, you can see that there's 2 cable grommets towards the outer edge of where your motherboard would sit. However, there's plenty of cable pass-throughs for the entire case, and you're not going to have many issues with that whatsoever. There's cable pass-throughs on the bottom of the PSU shroud. The one that you would use for your GPU power will be blocked if you install fans on the bottom of the case. On the back side of the case, there's a cable management raceway with Velcro tie downs and plenty of space to route the cables. I thought I'd do something a little bit different here and show you what a fully built system looks like when it's cable managed. Be aware, I didn't really spend heaps of time cable managing this. This is just how you would place your cables if you did a build. As for fan and radiator support, at the top of the case, you can do up to 3 120mm fans, 2 140mm fans, or up to a 360mm radiator. At the front of the case, it doesn't technically support any radiators, but it will support up to 3 140mm fans. On the bottom of the PSU shroud, you can do up to 3 120mm fans, and on the rear of the case, you can do a single 140mm fan shown by this pre-installed fan. For motherboard support, you can do ITX up to eATX with a maximum width of 280mm. As you can see here, this case does support back connector motherboards, which is why we're going to be using one for this build. Sometimes chucking a board in at this stage gives you guys a good idea of what it would look like. For air cooler support, it supports air coolers with a maximum height of up to 184mm. GPU support is pretty standard here, a maximum length of 415mm in total. You can also use a vertical GPU bracket if you'd like. Most vertical brackets should work here as there is no horizontal support on any of these slot covers. For case wiring, we have a USB Type-A connector, front panel audio, we have a block for all the lights and all the switches, and a USB Type-C cable. As for the I/O itself, we've got a power button with a combined power light, a reset button, a combined headphone and microphone jack, 2 USB Type-A ports, and a USB Type-C port. That's everything I think you need to know about the Phanteks Eclipse G400A for now. Let's do our usual thing. Let's do a build. We'll test the thermals, and I'll let you guys know what's up with this fun new case from Phanteks. As for thermals, the G400A is fairly good, and this is a pretty good all-round case for thermal performance. Keep in mind, we're using a 360ml liquid cooler. We're also using the maximum installable fans in the configuration for this case, which does give it fairly excellent thermals. However, also be aware that if you use less fans, you may still get the same thermal. So overall, the results here are fairly good, and I would say that Phanteks is continuing what they did with the P400A. Like I said, they expanded on it and just made this a really nice, well-rounded case. Now, if you're interested in any of the hardware used in this build, there's a PCPartPicker list down below. The biggest question is, what do I think of this case and how do I feel about this case? Because that's the whole thing with cases, right? It's all about how you feel about it. Well, I gotta say, the build quality and the design of the G400A is classic Phanteks. It's excellent. It's got a really nice RGB strip on the edge of the PSU shroud, which, like I mentioned in our last couple case reviews, people don't really care about lighting, but when it's done right, it's nice. And this accented piece here is nice. It's the perfect amount of lighting. Even if none of the fans had lighting, I still reckon that that on its own would look pretty nice and clean. As for the design itself, I really like the front here. It reminds me of a speaker box. I think I mentioned this when we saw this at Computex, but it's got this airflow channel that kind of drags the air into the front of the case. It's like a plastic shroud. But like I said, the design is absolutely gorgeous. Everything about this case screams classic Phanteks. Really well built, really nice execution, and it's a wonder that they didn't make something like this a little bit sooner, if I'm being honest, because what I noticed is they had metallic gear, they had magnesium gear, and that was their lower tier case brand, and the quality of this is like that, but I guess they got rid of those two brands and made that type of quality part of their regular product stack. It's really nice to build in. It's got really good cable management. However, there is one thing that I will comment on with this case, and it's in regards to using back connector motherboards. What I found is the gap between the back of the motherboard and the side panel can be quite small. So just keep that in mind if you're building with a back connector motherboard. Really pliable PSU cables will be a better fit for this case. I did have a little bit of trouble getting the back panel on, but ultimately I put the case flat on its side and then pushed the side panel on and it was good to go. And I didn't have any issues with any cables becoming unplugged or anything like that. I guess at this price point with this many included fans, there has to be some sacrifices made here, but ultimately not a big, terrible sacrifice. The fact that it even supports back connector boards at this price point is a bonus on its own. There's not really much more to add to this other than Phanteks has made a really capable case. They've made something that is interesting. They've made something that's not a fish tank. They've made something that looks really cool. And the design language for the case, including this cooler as well, is unified. I really, really like it. If there is one thing I want to add though, we used the new Phanteks Nexlinq controller, and it's one of the first RGB controllers I've seen that has full Windows dynamic lighting capability. And essentially, you plug it in, install the software, switch it to Windows dynamic lighting, and you can control all the lighting with Windows rather than using any RGB software, which is a nice little touch. But if you're interested in this new case, the G400A from Phanteks, they're starting at $99 US. You heard that right, $99 US. An absolute cracker of a price with 4 included fans, which are very, very nice fans. Yeah, it's hard to argue against this case if you're looking at building something and not spending a ton of money on a case that has heaps of included fans. And that's it. Phanteks has done it again. It's a really nice case to kind of round out the year. I like when the year ends with something really, really cool like this, but I gotta say, we know what Phanteks has got cooking, and 2025 is gonna be a banger of a year for cases from everyone. So make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for all that. But I'm out of here. I think we've only got one more case review for the year left. How exciting. I can't even say what it is, but there's heaps of cool stuff coming still. You know, like before CES, all these companies love to just jam stuff in just before Christmas and New Year. I don't know why. They could just wait till after CES for all of it. But, you know, it's better for you guys. But it's not so good for my mental health.